foundation. Along both walls, at intervals Ashworth estimated as 120 feet, there were niches. Cut directly into the stone, each was about a foot wide and 2 feet tall. In every niche the men had passed, without exception, sat a small object made of the same dark iron as the door. Ashworth described the objects as figurines, though he was careful to note he was not certain they were representational. Some appeared to depict human figures. Others appeared to depict animals of a kind he could not identify. A third group depicted shapes that were not obviously either. All were between 4 and 6 inches tall. All were made with a precision of casting that Ashworth, who had done graduate work in metallurgy at Freiburg, wrote he could not have reproduced in any foundry then operating in the United States. He noted the temperature of one figurine, held briefly in his palm, at approximately blood warm, significantly warmer than the ambient air. The figurines, he wrote, were not decorations. What they were he could not say, but he was certain, in a way he could not fully justify from the evidence, that they were doing something. When he held one and closed his eyes, he had the impression of a very faint sound at the edge of hearing, like a note held on an instrument in a room several doors away, and when he opened his eyes and set the figurine back in its niche, the impression stopped. The note ends with a paragraph Ashworth wrote in a hand very different from the one he had used up to that point. Letters are larger, lines sloped downward. Colwell, he wrote, had gone ahead. Rees had stopped and would not go further, and was sitting against the wall of the corridor with his lantern turned low, and would not answer when spoken to. The current of air from below had grown stronger, and had brought with it a smell he could not describe accurately, but that reminded him of the inside of a smithy at the end of a working day, hot iron and something else beneath it. He was going after Colwell. He would leave the note in a place where the mule might find it if the animal wandered back to the entrance, which he calculated as reasonably likely, because the mules had been picketed just inside the door. If the note was found, and he was not, then whoever found it should carry a message to the elder at the village east of the canyon. And the message was that the elder had been right, and that the geologists were sorry, and that the door should be closed again, if it could be closed by any means available to the people who would come looking for them. The mule was found 6 days later at a stock tank about 7 miles from the canyon mouth, saddlebag tied to its neck. Inside the bag was the note, along with a small quantity of hard bread, a folding knife, and a lock of hair tied with a piece of thread that a widow in Durango later identified as belonging to her husband. No one recorded the animal's appearance with particular attention, because no one who saw the mule had reason to think its appearance mattered, and by the time anyone connected it to the missing men, weeks had passed. The follow-up expedition, mounted by the Territorial Survey in late September, did not find the door. Its 3 leaders were experienced. They had Ashworth's rough map and the ethnologist's original report. 11 days were spent in the side canyon and its tributaries, and the final report stated that no structure matching Ashworth's description existed at the coordinates he had provided, and that if such a structure had ever existed, it had been buried, filled in, or otherwise concealed by parties unknown between the disappearance of the first party and the arrival of the second. The report noted that the follow-up party had encountered evidence of what its leader called recent human activity in the canyon, in the form of disturbed sandstone, freshly moved boulders, and the remains of a small fire lit and extinguished within the previous fortnight. The report was filed and the case was closed. Names of the 3 missing men were removed from the active survey rosters, and a small pension was quietly arranged for Colwell's widow through a private appropriation, never itemized in the territorial budget. Mainstream opinion on all of this, insofar as the mainstream has an opinion, is that the 3 geologists most likely died in a rockfall or a flash flood, that the note was written under the stress of an emergency whose actual nature we can no longer reconstruct, that the metal door either did not exist or was a misidentification under poor light, and that correlations with Tartaria and Old World scripts are the products of researchers' pattern matching across disconnected data. This position is coherent. It has the advantage of not requiring us to revise our understanding of who built what on the Colorado Plateau, and the further advantage of not requiring us to take the oral tradition of the descendant pueblos as literal testimony about literal doors. Puebloan elders, when asked about the mainstream position, have generally not answered. When they have answered, they have said that the mainstream is welcome to its position, that the descendants will continue to keep their own counsel about what is in the ground of the country their ancestors walked away from, that the doors, wherever they now are being maintained by the people whose duty it is to maintain them, and that no further discussion is required. Whether the three geologists found what they thought they found, whether the elder who tried to warn them was speaking of a real thing or a metaphor they took too literally, and whether the empire that appears on the old European maps, as Tartaria left its fingerprints on the Colorado Plateau as it may have on so many other places, remains a question no one now living is in a position to answer with certainty. The doors, if they exist, are not on the tourist maps. The inscription, if it was ever copied faithfully, has not been published. And the corridor Ashworth walked into with a bullseye lantern in the summer of 1888 is either a hole in the sandstone that never existed, or a hole in the sandstone someone, at considerable trouble, has kept the rest of us from finding for 100